So we applied to go to study. Somehow California still stayed in our minds. So we ended up going to California for about 4.5 years. And so she studied psychology and I did theology. And so that's where, now that was part of the story of how we met people like Kanji and Christian.
I don't understand over this story. This story has history. so
we have a lot of history.
You go to now California,
So
and you went there with the intention of, okay, I'll study theology.
Yes, so I was studying theology. Again, fun, crazy miracle story.
Does this mean now you leave chapel? Like it's not
So
not
chapel
like,
sends us.
or chapel sends you?
So chapel sends
Okay.
us. And they graciously said, I mean, we can't afford it. Obviously, if you're asking us for scholarship, we don't have money. And of course, it's we picked some of the most expensive schools in the world. I mean, to study what we're studying. But it's like, if you guys have chums, go. So we're like, okay. So, I mean, of course, we're married now. It's not like when you're single and you can now try and push.
Yes.
So, I mean, now it's like, how do we get the money? But again, God really provided miraculously. I got the only scholarship that the school gave. That was a total scholarship, like a full paid tuition scholarship. And again, these stories don't just happen, by the way. I think a lot of it has to do with purpose, because we really felt, at that point, I just thought, I want to understand what the church has to do to reach people who don't like church. And I was just like, I don't think I'll learn it here. At that point, there were very few people. Now you can. There are people thinking that way. But back in the day, nobody was thinking that way. And so I was like, I need to be in an out-of-the-box place where people, already the culture is not pro-Christian. And to see what is the church doing to reach people who already are turned off by Christianity. And so it was such a purpose thing that we need to go for that reason. And like I said,
That's crazy.
we ended up getting a full scholarship, which was the only one in the school. So no American, nobody else got it except me.
No one in the world got that scholarship.
That
but
year,
you.
it was me who got that scholarship. And it was a crazy story because at some point they didn't write back to us, so there was no email, so it was my calls at night trying to call them. So at some point I gave up. Carol kept pushing, and we even missed the date. You know, you've told guys we're off. I don't know, it's so embarrassing. You've told guys, yeah, by September we'll be done. Nini. We started telling guys we want to sell our stuff, and then September comes and guys are still seeing you in town like,
Oh, me.
what happened? It was one of those, I was so disillusioned. But anyway, fast forward, God allowed, just through her faith, we finally went. Then we realized the whole thing that had been happening is God had been orchestrating something really miraculous, because of missing that September intake, I was able to come in and that scholarship was available when we landed. You know,
What?
had I gotten in when I thought we were going to get in, I would not have gotten it.
Not that it may be a half scholarship or something.
Or maybe none. You know, I mean, those things were not easy to get.
Or maybe none.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one. Then again, had we come in at the time that we were supposed to come in, Cara would not have, because she didn't get her psychologist. They didn't get her papers got lost in the mail. So she didn't get her degree. They didn't accept her in the school. They only accepted me. So again, a huge crushing disappointment. But then when we landed, they said, we have a half scholarship for somebody who is studying, whose spouse is a full-time student. So I get a full one and a half to study theology, not to study psychology.
Yes.
So, but then because she didn't get they didn't get her application, she didn't get a student visa. She got a student wife visa, and the visa I got allowed the student's wife to work full-time. So all of a sudden, I have a full scholarship to study theology. She has a half scholarship to study theology, and she has a job that can afford to pay for the other half. And so she finishes all that. And then, I mean, this it's a crazy story.
Yeah.
It's the things you read about that you think happen to other people. When we finish, she finishes her first degree because it was a 2-year degree, and I'm still going on. So she's like, but you know me, I didn't come here to study theology. Me, I came to study psychology. And me, I'm like, dude, chick, I mean, God has already given us by now. Nobody gets what we have. Eh? So me, I'm like, stop disturbing God. Because she's telling me, let's pray for my scholarship so even me, I can study psychology. I'm like, hey, I think we've overprayed now. Eh? Let's leave God out of this. She's like, no, we need to pray. Because if God could give you your scholarship, why can't he give me mine? And so we began to pray. And so, I mean, it happened so weirdly. There's a guy in church who was... he was actually sitting he used to sit, the church we used to go to were the only Africans. And in fact, I used to wonder, why are we in this church, you know? But for some reason, God really wanted us in that church. A small little church, nothing exciting. They didn't have many resources, but we just felt for this season, we need to be here. So this guy used to always sit there. So one day we're having coffee after church, and the guy comes up, asks us what we do. So I tell him, but then of course, Carol says, yeah, in fact, me, I finished. I'd like to study psychology. I'm trying to apply at my school, Fuller, but they don't have opportunities right now. So the guy says, oh, have you heard of this other school? It's called Azusa Pacific. And it's a really good school. We'd not heard of it. And it's like they've got a really good psychology program. In fact, many of the guys who teach in it were at Fuller. So it's actually at par, but they tend to have more scholarships. So we're like, no, we've never heard of it. He says, I mean, give me your email because I can send you some info about it. Your address. This is pre-email. So we give him our address. So next week in the mail, we get this brochure from the school. You know, the big
that
catalog.
book, yeah.
So you get the book. Of course, you're going through all the programs. Then you come to the School of Psychology, the big picture of the dean, because each school has a picture of the dean. It's that dude.
Wow.
So long story short, she gets the full scholarship. And she gets her psychology degree paid for. And so she came out with 2 degrees out of it. And this was all God's intention because she's the one who was able to bridge theology and psychology. And be able to bring, and a lot of what Mavuno's, the things we've done at Mavuno have had a lot of her psychology. Because psychology teaches you to think how people are thinking. As opposed to starting with where you are, you start with where people are thinking. And I think we need to actually we need to teach the Bible, understanding where people are. And I think that's what the genius of Carol and what she's been able to bring to Mavuno is the ability to think where people are thinking.
That is insane.
So for the next 4.5 years, we're out of commission.
So when you were in America, you were, for those 4 years, you were in school?
We're in school most of the time. But a couple of interesting things happened. Number one, we started meeting all these young Kenyans. Who are just some of them used to be saved, Christian Union, went to State 2 just slapped them around. Many of them were out of status, they were in debt, doing messed up things. And so, we started meeting a lot of young Kenyans. And a couple of them actually approached us and said, guys, you're pastors, eh? We desperately need pastors in this place. Be our pastors. So I remember just sitting down with Karen saying, okay, we'll do it. And we started meeting. So I started meeting 4 guys every Sunday. And Carol started meeting 4 girls. So we'd cook for them. They'd come to our house, make chapels. And after church, on Sunday, they'd just we'd talk through the whole evening on Sundays. And it became a standing date for quite a few years. Now, those 4 guys, you know them. Kaima, Kanji, Hari, and Christian. They were not Milele at that point. They were just actually a group of friends. So those guys actually ended up becoming the group Milele and became a very, very popular music group. But at that point, that was not even in the cards. My thought was just, let me just help these guys.
In fact, Kanji narrates and says the first time you heard them sing, he came and asked you, hey, so what did you think? You're like, hey, you guys have nice suits.
And it was true. They sounded terrible. Because what happened is they found a benefactor. There was this lady who really liked Christian. And so she hooked them up with a phenomenal keyboard and a gig. So they had the gear and then gave them a serious gig. And the gig was like serious bands. She was a wealthy woman. So she had this party she'd call her friends to on Christmas, and she'd have like 5 world-class bands in a very nice property she owned. So we're not talking about like a small. Christian has a way of just knowing really impressive people. So this mama said, you guys are going to be the main act. So we've listened to all these world-class bands, and then now drum roll, Midnights, Milele. I was like, are these boys ready for this? And sure enough, they sang. I was like, you guys are not ready. You're not ready. So, but they had some pinstripe suits. So that's all I could remember. The suits were nice.
You were embarrassed for the Kenyans.
I was actually embarrassed. But the weird thing is, that's the only time I ever got embarrassed hearing those guys sing. Because I think from that gig, they worked like dogs. And the next time I had them, I couldn't believe. I was like, what happened? Something switched. And every time I had them from that point on, they just got better and better and better. They just put in, I think they had the discipline to just put in the hard work in their craft. I think when they first got the equipment, they were just using skills. But after that, they really just became hard workers. And they became all phenomenal musicians.
Hey, for those of you who haven't watched the Milele series, it's also on this channel.
Yeah.
Okay, back to you, Pastor.
So the other thing that I did, so helped start that. A lot of other young Kenyans began to kind of rally around us. So we ended up now even finding a place where we could actually hire on Saturdays. So we started having a fellowship. And it grew. It really
started doing church.
We actually, we didn't call it church, we just call it fellowship. Because us guys, it's like we're just caring for these guys. We had no such ambitions. But it was so interesting because with time, a group of older Kenyans were meeting. They had a fellowship as well. And so they were like, why don't we combine our two groups and form a church? And I had never thought you could plan. I'd never had no ambition of starting a Kenyan church. Because for me, I've always thought, why Kenyan? Why can't it be an integrated church for everyone? But I think I'd seen how these students also struggled and how these people, when they went and relocated, struggled so hard. Because even when they went to different churches, nobody really understood where they were coming from. And so at that point, just on the basis of just loving these young people, I was like, let's do it. So we actually formed a church. I became the youth pastor. The guy who was leading that fellowship became the senior pastor. I got ordained by that church. And we actually got a venue, started meeting on Sundays. The church grew. Started doing youth camps, just like the Word of Life camp where I got saved. I remember one camp we had 200 young adults, Kenyan young adults come, and we do it every year. We started doing musicals. It was a phenomenal experience. So we actually planted a church which exists still today.
What's the name of the church?
It's called Kenya Interdenomination Christian Church, KICC. I just remember KICC. I'm sure I've watched up something there. And actually started even several other churches. So I've been there and visited. In fact, it was so funny. I went with a group of people from Mavuno the last time I went, and none of them knew the story. So at some point it was very weird because it felt like going with your dad somewhere and then discovering he has another family. Because all the guys were like, "Oh, pastor," and this guy, "No, this is our pastor." But we were very privileged to be part of that journey. So that church actually started, but when the time came to go back, we actually said, we're done. We need to come back to Kenya. We also got to pastor a church for about 9 months, 6 to 9 months in Wisconsin, which was a college ministry that was completely in the city of Milwaukee. Very secular young people.
So, and this is not Kenyans, this is just...
No, we just got an internship with a church there, and we were made in charge. We went thinking we were going to work under somebody, but when we got there, that guy had just been fired. And so they told us, you're in charge. And so for all those months, we looked after a group of it's the first time I met people who have no idea about, when you say, no, God said to Moses, the first question, okay, hold up. Who's Moses? They'd never even known that there was even, the concepts were completely Greek to them.
Completely unchurched.
And for me, again, that was a very formative stage for Mavuno because it helped me begin to now have a compassion for young people. To say, don't assume people know what you're talking about, our language had to be completely simple for people to even understand what you're talking about. You had to declutter, remove all the Christianese, and actually just speak from the heart. And it was a fantastic time. We had a really, really great experience with those students as well. So then we came back.
And let me say, these students, these were not Kenyans again.
Completely
so
American.
This is even different culture.
Different culture, yeah. So that was a growing up experience.
This was you're going to Turukana.
This,
even though you guys do missions here.
It was missions completely. And the Americans, and I'm still friends with some of them. And it was interesting how those guys were completely, it was such a good experience because teaching the gospel to people who have no clue what the gospel is. So it really made me conscious about some of the things we say as Christians where we assume people understand Christian culture and they just don't. So I think in all these things, God was just preparing us for what would come when we went back home.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I like what you're saying because for you, it was always clear that you're coming back home because of the purpose.
We knew, it's like we came here to study and go back home and change our generation.
I know guys who've gone to Stato knowing they're coming and they're still in Stato.
Actually what happened when we finished, because I did really well in my studies, I actually got offered by two different professors, two very good professors. I was offered a full ride to do a PhD. They offered me full, be a teacher's assistant, full paid. And to both of them, I said, no, I'm going home. I'm done with why I came. PhD was not part of the plan. And I remember talking to one of my friends who was a Korean and telling him, dude, these two guys have offered me. And the guy actually told me, you're stupid. Those were his words, you're stupid. Nobody gets that opportunity. This opportunity isn't being given to other people in this school. How dare you be so presumptuous that you can say no. It's almost like it's like you're spiting God by saying no. And actually, even the guys at the church that we had started, we had delegations coming to tell us, you guys are not hearing God. This is, the devil is confusing you guys. Remember, at that point, Kenya was actually doing really badly as a country.
Yep.
The economy had actually hit, I think, negative 0.3 growth rate. People of the US embassy had lines around it. Guys trying to get out of the country. Planes coming in were empty. Every plane leaving was full. So it wasn't the time. Nobody was coming back to Kenya at that point. So guys were like, dude, we can give you a job. We can get you a work. You can get you a permit to stay here. Why would you go back? We have a legitimate church. It's registered. You're the guys who started it. I mean, duh. But for us, we're like, no, that would take too long. That's not our plan. We need to get back. And so they had a party for us and they released us. I remember we had one camp. We had our final camp with the young people. And I mean, God really checked in on that camp. It was, these young guys, many of them they were smoking weed. I mean, Stato had harakisha people. But in that camp, so many people got saved. So many people made radical commitments to follow Jesus. And I remember at that point that many of them came up to us and said, yeah, you're right. I think your time is done. You guys can go back. I think we've got this. And I remember just telling guys, yeah, you guys have this. And we got on a plane, put all our stuff, and we came back home and started working at Nairobi Chapel.